It's always something, right? Sorry about that. So, welcome to my Sunday live stream where we talk about photography and catch up on what's new. And I do my best to answer any questions I can about photography and Olympus cameras in particular, and maybe some photo editing or what have you. But I mainly do this to kind of keep in touch with everyone and see how everybody's doing. Um, as you guys know, I've been kind of dealing with stiff neck. I don't know what else to call it. Basically, I have a mildly herniated disc at this point, so it still aches a little bit. It's I'm gonna go another couple of weeks with the routine, decompression, ice pack, heating pad, and get through it best I can. But I just can't stream as much as I used to because this position, leaning forward is what's I'm pretty sure what's been causing it because usually after a stream that I've been doing these last few weeks, it really hurts. So, but it's getting a little better. So I'm trying to improve my posture when I sit. So I'm trying to sit up straight and, you know, solve the root of the problem, which is essentially my posture when I'm working. And it's held me back on doing a lot of videos. I tried to do one yesterday, uh, you know, on some video settings. It's not something a lot of people care about, but I wanted to cover a couple of questions that came up in my on my videos, and I was thinking about starting another series. Because I have the tutorial series, the vlogs, and then I have the fine print series. Um, but I want to do another simple one where it's just sort of like Ask Rob, right? So when I see a comment in the videos, um, I'll do a short video answering that question. And I think it'll help a lot of people out because sometimes it's hard to type in the comment section exactly how to go to a different menu setting or what button to push. And, although a lot of people can follow that, it's a lot easier just to show people because it's amazing what things I take for granted, uh, when I'm using the camera, either pushing a button or going into a menu system or doing something in post processing that uh, a lot of people have no idea what I'm talking about. For example, a comment came up the other day about, I say this is easily fixed in post processing. So the video is about comparing some lenses, and you just need to apply a little bit of sharpening to a kit lens to kind of get it virtually the same as a pro lens. For basic all intents and purposes. I mean, we know it's not the same, but um, to get basic results for a beginning photographer, to get better results, a little sharpening and post processing or a little bit of, exposure comp. It's very easily done, right? But some people, they have no idea what I'm talking about. They're like, what do you mean do sharpening? What is post processing? You know, all they know is taking a picture in their camera and, showing the pictures in JPEGs on their computer. They don't know anything about post processing even. And another question that came up was like, and this was the video I was going to do, sort of the first of my series of Ask Rob, um, was they they couldn't figure out why they were in movie mode, and they have an EM1 Mark III, why they couldn't select any other picture modes like flat or OM log. Those were their two choices, and they had no idea that they had to go into the video menu, change the specification setting, and turn the picture mode off. And then they can go back and choose natural, vivid, monochrome, or whatever profile they want to use. So I guess it's possible that the default setting is set to go to picture mode as on. And another person commented on that same question and said, "This is not in the manual," And it's very confusing when they say how to do this one setting, but then go back to, you're on page, let's say 86, and they want you to go back to page 32 for more details on that particular setting. And it's just a testament to really how difficult it is to write a manual. I think it's not an easy thing. So I don't put too much onus on Olympus. They did actually a fair job getting to all of the features, but it's not organized in a way that um, it fits most people's workflow, right? Uh, the example I just gave, you want to turn the picture mode on or off in the specification settings, and it's like it's not obvious that if you want to use a natural color profile that you have to turn that off, right? So I don't know why they made it a picture mode separate from the other picture modes. You got natural, vivid, monochrome, etc. Just keep scrolling down until you see flat or you see OM log. Why do you have to go into the menu to turn that particular feature on and off? Um, so there's issues with the menu system in the camera itself that makes writing the manual for the camera even more difficult. And a lot of these things when someone asks me a question sometimes, like, what, how do you like the example I just gave? I happen to know that one, but I dig into the manual sometimes when I don't know it off the top of my head, and I do find the answer. But as I said, it's not always straightforward. You have to go to page 86, then page 32, and then go down to the appendices to look at the different features. It's just really disarrayed. So I really can appreciate the struggle a lot of people that are beginning with photography and buying their first real camera, that it's very intimidating, you know. And hopefully, and that's really why I created this channel from the beginning, was to answer those kinds of questions and walk people through step by step how to set the settings on their camera. I really haven't done a lot on photography itself, like how to um, do landscape images, like composition and all of that. Because I'm not a great photographer personally, right? I like to take pictures. I get a decent one every now and then, but I'm not going to win any awards or uh, get thousands of followers or get recognized for my photography work, right? I just enjoy it. It's a hobby, I do professionally shoot, real estate, architectural type photography time to time. And those jobs have been a little far and few between lately, but I'm working on it. And, that kind of work is very specialized to do a good job. You don't just simply walk in and take a picture of a room or a building. You have to have a certain skill set. And, and it's not hard. You can learn it just like anything else. But uh, getting back to why I don't do more vlogs, like I really enjoy watching. Like I was watching Simon Baxter yesterday, where he goes out with his dog, and talks about trees, and he really gave me a different perspective on looking at like woodland type photography, right? Like I never really thought about uh, how the branches, kind of work together or fight for or complement each other to get sun, in nature, the way things interconnect, the branches and the moss and all of that stuff, right? It's like I used to just look at a tree more like from a foresty point of view, like its overall shape and position in the frame, but I never really looked directly or deeply at the branches and how they interact with other branches uh, and other trees. And I thought that was a very interesting perspective, and then of course there's Thomas Heaton, he likes to do those wide landscapes and travel. And I always thought I could do those kinds of vlogs, but the only time, and I've said this many times, you know, I watch their vlogs with a little bit of a chuckle, being a vlogger myself, right? Watching them like I just watched the one by Simon Baxter. I think it just came out. I'm not sure. I don't see the dates all the time on the videos I'm watching. But I see him walking down a hill. He's down like 100 yards, 100 meters away from the vlogging camera. And I'm like, dude, you got to walk all the way back to get your camera, when you're making this video, it's just. And then, of course, Thomas Heaton does all of the B-roll of him driving in his car. But then you see his car coming from, 100 yards, 100 meters away, pulling up to the camera. So, he had to set the camera, drive all the way out, then come back. It's like, um, so I always get a little chuckle out of the B-roll I see in a lot of videos, particularly those kinds of things, because I think about, this is a really great video. What did they do to help tell their story and make this an enjoyable vlog? And and then and then I'm thinking, man, if I had to do that shot, yeah, I'd have to set the camera up 100, 200 meters away and have a wireless mic. It's like it's not well, anyway, that's that. So anyway, let me say hello to who's here today. Let's see, Jeff Painter, Steve Page, John Utze, good to see you. Glenn V is here. Marcia, good to see you. And Stephen Long, yeah, stay with Stephen Long says he would probably say that Panasonic Lumix menu is easier to use. I agree 100%. When I got a GX85 and now I got the S5, it's like, the menu system is very, very intuitive. But, it's funny, on the Panasonic S5, it has a lot more features than the GX85. And it's actually a very complicated menu system again. Once like our Olympus cameras have tons of features. And when I got into the S5, it had tons of features. And then all of a sudden, the menu system was not that intuitive, right? You can do it, suddenly it just became almost as difficult as my Olympus systems when I started with those. The GX85, on the other hand, I found very simple to use, very straightforward, and it has a lot of features too. But it was very intuitive, so I think whatever they did on the S5, it's not quite as, and like I said, it might be the fault of just having so many features. They had to lay them out somewhere, right? But yeah, I agree. As a rule of thumb, the Panasonic menus are probably the best in the industry. Maybe Canon might be a little better or equal. I really like the Canon menu system when I had a Canon RP. But anyhow, Mike Ham, good to see you, and happy Pi Day to all the nerds out there. Oh, that's right, I forgot about that. 3.1492. I used to know it out to like 10 decimal places. I can't remember anymore. And Anne says, let's see. Let me see if I can use my new feature here without breaking my neck. Mike says, heading to Florida Keys next week for vacation. Anyone have any must-take pictures sites? A really cool. Oh, okay. Yeah, chime in if you've been to the Florida Keys. I bet Marsha would know because she lives down there. Not in the Keys, but in Florida. And the Keys, God, Florida is such a big state. It takes like 5 or 6 hours to go from top to bottom. And then when you get to the Keys, another couple hours of driving, mostly because the roads are so slow. And honestly, I've been to the Keys and I was not a big fan personally. Because there's really no beaches there. It's mostly just rock and then ocean. They're beautiful. I mean, the water's clear and there's a lot of things to do there. I did some karaoke at one of the bars and but yeah, I didn't stay too long, really. Just a half a day there, and then I didn't have any urge to go back. I didn't feel it was, I really like beaches and going out into the water and snorkeling and all that stuff. But it has a very fun, relaxing atmosphere. And there are a lot of things to do there on the land with amazing views and weather. And Glenn B says, first time here, calling in from London. Well, welcome, Glenn. Glad you could join us this morning. I um I always like to see if you're new here, just shout out where you're from and say hi. It's always fun to see if there's new people here. And oops, John says welcome. Let's see if I can get through this. Oh, here's a tip. Who's it from? It is from Marcia. See, I knew it. Marcia would know something, right? Walk around Key West away from Duval Street. There is a very interesting cemetery there. Wow, I didn't see that one. Make sure you drink Cuban coffee and frozen key lime pie. Yeah, I think I did try that. That sounds familiar. And Anne says, "You've done a great job in explaining the menu system. I've learned." Oh, thank you, Anne. I'm glad I could help. And let's see. And Matt says, "Your videos explaining how to use EM10 was one of the reasons I chose Olympus." And that's exactly goes back to another point that I made in other videos or streams that, it's after the sale follow up of showing customers how to use the freaking camera, that I think could make a difference and people will start choosing it because, well, anyway, I don't want to rehash that argument, but, there's that, I think it would make a difference, but what do I know? I'm not a marketing guy, really. And Darko says, Rob, learning you honesty and being real makes you a rock star, period. You have helped so many people and you are a legend in the photography scene. By the way, good morning. Oh, thank you. Good morning, Darko. Guys, you guys are so kind. The other thing I heard was that a lot of people, they bought the camera and it just sat on their shelf for a year or two before they saw my videos and learned how to use it because they got so frustrated with it. And that's just people that still had their camera. I guarantee a lot of people sold their cameras off after they got frustrated with it. And, that's a lot of lost customers, right? Unfortunately. And Paul says hi. Hi, Paul. Paul Williams. And let me go down. I try to get to all the comments as best I can. I was watching Jimmy's stream, Jimmy Chang stream, over at Red 35 Photography. He was over an hour behind on the chat section. It just, I was shocked because he does a presentation or has a discussion in the beginning, and that sets him back at least 20, 30 minutes. And then when he answers a question, he falls behind even more. So, but I'm glad he does them. He does awesome streams. His streams are on Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is like, I don't know, 3 or 4 o'clock in London time. Uh, but you should watch his streams are a lot more fun. He has a lot more energy and I don't know how with kids in the house and working as hard as he does. But he has a very high energy level. And David Tellett has a question. Hi David, how you doing? No photo walk this week. Um, David lives nearby me, and we belong to a local photography club run by David Crooks, and we go out every couple of weeks at a minimum and do photo walks. So if you guys want to join me um, for a photo walk in my area, just check out the 495 photographer meetup Beltway something. Uh, if David Crooks is here, I'll put a link to it, or go to my forum. I have links to the photography club I'm a member of in my forum, robtrek.com/forum. But anyhow, David's asking, does Panasonic have something like the Ollie quick panel menu? Yes, it does. It does. As a matter of fact, on the S5, they have a Q button. Oh, this is all out of focus. They have the Q button, which is essentially like the control panel. I haven't used this in so long. There's no battery in it. Anyway, it's very similar. It's very similar to the super control panel. But the difference being is you can customize it to whatever settings you want to put in there. Whereas the Olympus super control panel is fixed, right? You can't really change anything that shows up. But the Panasonic one, you can put in whatever you want. So it's actually a superior system in that respect, or more customizable. Superior is a strong word. Okay. And Stephen Long, new here. Welcome from Kent, UK. I have so many UK followers here, but welcome. I'm glad you could make it. And John also says welcome. And Glenn says, I'm using the EM5 Mark III with a view to doing some macro photography and macro film. Okay. I have a few videos on macros, so if you're kind of a beginner, I think they're good videos to get you started. I use extension tubes. I don't have a macro lens. So if you want to look at how to do macro without a macro lens, I have a few videos. So just search my channel for macro and you'll see them. Robin Wong has some videos, and also Facebook Olympus just did a macro seminar on how to do macro photography. I didn't watch it, but let me see if I can find that for you. 1 second. I'm not going to find it. Crap. Is it in my bookmarks? Let me see. Oh, I do have it. Okay. So let me click on this. This is the mastering macros. So I'm going to put this link in the comment section. Let me try. Okay. So there you have it. And if you close this, you'll see a lot of other tutorials in here. Not a lot, but some, right? Like I said, I didn't watch this one, so I don't know if it's any good, to be honest. But it's just another source for you. And what I like about this, if you look, there's a video here 6 weeks ago. There's one here. Let me close this for you. There's one here, this is 4 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, 2 days ago. These are not old. These are new. So JIP is definitely pushing education, right, to some extent. So I think this is a great first step for JIP, or early, I shouldn't say first, but early action by JIP to do more education on how to use their cameras. So I really like that. Okay. And Amir says there are many macro lectures from Olympus UK and Get Olympus. I wonder if they're going to release the 100 macro. I hope so. I hope so. So Glenn, there's actually many more resources. you know, I've never personally searched for these. The only way I found this one is because I do get text updates from Olympus, and they pointed me to this live update. But um, definitely, you know, once you get into the community and start to develop some friends, either through the social media here on YouTube or you know, with back home, they'll be able to point you to a lot of places like Amir here. You know, is pointing you that there is more out there. I'm just not so aware of them personally. Just a couple like I found, and let me make sure I didn't miss. Oh, there is one here. Oops. I put in a suggestion for this Stream app that I'm using to make this chat section easier to use. Uh, Richard says, oh, from Alberta, Canada. Welcome, Richard. And he says, thanks for reviews, etc. Reviewing between you and Robin and Peter and Joe, of course, Red 35. I ordered the 12 to 45 2.8 first pro lens. Awesome. Congratulations. It's either the 12 to 40 f2.8, which I'm sure that's what you meant. And then there's a second lens, a 12 to 45 f4. Both are excellent lenses. The only difference being the aperture, right? So the smaller aperture is a little smaller lens, meaning f4 I think is the smaller aperture. It's sort of an inverse relationship. As aperture numbers go up, the smaller the aperture, right? Because it's a ratio. But I do have a great video on exposure. I have two videos on exposure and aperture. Uh, well, two videos on exposure for beginners, which, you know, if all the numbers when you're doing photography are a little confusing, I did my best to explain them, and I think they came out okay. I'm really happy with how those videos came out. And Annette says on Tuesday, you spell it with a TH. It's like, is it Thursday or Tuesday? But you say on Tuesday, Olympus UK has a live tech Q&A. Oh, I got to check that out. Oh, sorry, I accidentally clicked this, but it's relevant. There's an excellent butterfly and nature conservatory of butterflies and birds. Yes, I did go to that when I was down there. I'm about 99% sure. I got some amazing butterfly pictures. But I was shooting with my little Fujifilm F10 compact camera, the old one from like 2005, which is like the last time I went to Florida. I've been to Florida in God 15 years. Um, and Corey says, best advice for a new photographer. I watched your whole beginner series. You know, if that's a question or a statement, but if it's a question, really, um, is just practice, right? Just go out and shoot and practice and focus on, you know, even if you just start in program mode, P mode, um, you know, focus on taking better pictures and not let the camera hold you back at first. Um, because you can just put the camera in program mode and go out and take some pictures and focus on, you know, learning composition and you know, uh, subjects, right? Telling a story, you know, all the things that help you take a better picture. Um, and I think, in my opinion, that you'll get more reward out of your camera by taking better pictures than you will by uh, getting bogged down with all the different settings and all the different things you can do. Because once you start to take better pictures and you can analyze those, then you can go back and say, okay, what can I do in my camera to make that image a little bit different when you're doing your own critiques, right? So basically just learn about let the camera handle the exposure and everything at first for you, right? Everything that you would see, and then concentrate on the content and story and composition in the image. Well, composition is more about, that's a little bit different than telling a story. Um, that's sort of a technical thing, right? So I would just say go out and take pictures and get a feel for taking better images. But the easiest place to start is just put the camera in program mode or aperture priority, learn the rules of composition, and break the rules when you're ready, if it makes sense. And then from composition, go into telling stories with your images. The strongest stories are like uh, journalism type photography, right? Journalists, right? Newspaper photographers when they used to be for real. Um, those guys, they don't follow anything with composition normally. They just capture the story, and the emotion and the story and the image is much more powerful than any of the composition or exposure or other elements in the photo, right? All the technical things about a photo are irrelevant a lot of times in journalistic type, but the images are very powerful. Um, so I would say as a beginner, right, and you want to learn how to use your camera, start with composition and subject matter. Trying to isolate your subject or define your subject, and uh, then from there, when you're analyzing your images, learn about some of the technical things of your camera that could improve that image, right? When you're critiquing your own images. If I hope that made sense. I'm so bad at articulating things sometimes on the fly, like in a live stream. Um, and Nature with Music is here. Good. Glad you can make it. And all right. Hopefully, I didn't miss any questions. If I missed your question at this point, uh, uh, go ahead and ask me again. I don't mind. It's so easy to miss a question on this chat system because I can only see 2 or 3 lines of chat at a time, and then I have to scroll up to see the rest. Now I know I have this window here, but the print is so small from my perspective, I can't read it at all. I'll show you what I'm looking at actually. So I read the stuff, over here. This is just large enough for me to see, but I can only see like there's 2 messages there. And this screen is so small, I can't read any of the text on that at all. So, oops, there we go. Um, and Annette says, sorry, my English, Tuesday the 16th at 1:30 p.m. And then they have a back. Oops, I'm sorry. Let me try and show this message. This is about the the streams in the UK where they have a live Q&A, sort of like I do here on Sundays, right? Um, but my stream is more social, and then there's some questions, right? um, but I've seen some Q&As from Olympus. I don't know if it was a UK one or not, but they're like every question they have a moderator, and every question is answered. Uh, so it's a much more real Q&A type stream than mine is, so to speak. And Benji says, I'm in the middle of photographing some artwork with my EM10 Mark II in natural yet overcast light here today, and I'm having problems with glare. Okay, there's 2 things you can do, just off the top of my head. Is you need to get a lens hood for your lens. So if you have a 14 to 42, it depends on what lens you're using, but the 14 to 42 kit lens uses a 37 millimeter ring thread. So look for a lens hood. I like the collapsible one. I'll show you one that I have. Is this one. And it's just a rubber lens hood, but for wide angle shots, I collapse it back so it doesn't vignette. And then for more telephoto shots, I can extend the lens hood out. So this is a 37 millimeter screw-on type rubber lens hood for the kit lens, and I've seen these priced anywhere. I paid like $8 for mine, but I've seen them as high as $30 for some reason. I don't know why. But shop around and you'll find one somewhere between $8 and $30, but it's worth every penny. Certainly at the lower end at $8. The other thing you can do is try and add a polarizer, uh, and again, you'll need a small one, a 37 millimeter, if you're going to use it on one lens. If you're going to use a polarizer on multiple lenses, buy a larger one and a step ring kit. Uh, so those are the two things. I think a lens hood would be a good place to start, and then try a polarizer to see if you can reduce some of the glare. The polarizer will help with glare if let's see, you're shooting artwork. If the artwork is kind of shiny, um, or behind glass, or if it's shiny or behind glass or both, then a polarizer will help. If it's more like you have multiple lights coming in surrounding the artwork, and that those lights are causing the glare on your lens, then a lens hood should help. And Matt says, I'd say that starting with photography is so much harder with current tech than film. Back then, ISO was fixed. I had one prime lens and only one. Uh, Dang it, the print is still a bit too small for me. Prime lens and maybe I'm gonna break my neck if I keep leaning like that. Nope. Well, anyway, I think he's saying that you only had to deal with exposure components, ISO, which was set by the film, aperture, and shutter speed, right? And then most of the film cameras, from the 60s and 70s on, had light meters in them, and you would just adjust it. Yeah, it was very simple. Uh, and you could minimize your digital camera to just those simple things, right? Put it in manual and then use the EV meter to take your shots. But again, that there's so many buttons and dials and settings to get to kind of see past before you can just use it simply as a manual camera, right? Like in the old days with just a simple light meter. So yeah, I agree that photography has become uh, can be much more complicated, but just put it in program mode and you only have to push the shutter button, right? Basically. But it's hard to see that when there's so many other buttons going so many other buttons going on, right? Seraphin's making fun of me. You don't need a stinking lens hood. Somebody that doesn't use lens hoods I know is Robin Wong. I mean, he will we always have that caveat, right? That yeah, there are times when you do need IBIS, you do need a lens hood, you do need a polarizer, but there are some people very adamant that say, I just don't use polarizers, I don't use lens hoods, I don't use IBIS, I don't know, whatever they don't want to use, um, because they can overcome that and with other methods. And photography, as Joe Edelman always liked to say, is about problem solving, right? So you're faced with a composition, or I should say, you're faced with a scene that might have some challenges, either with exposure or the way the lighting is, or the whatever the challenge is, and you have to solve that problem using the capabilities of your camera and or additional gear. Most problems with with photography can be solved in camera once you develop your photography skill set, right? So the higher your photography skill set, the less the gear matters, but also the less it gets in the way. Because sometimes the gear does matter, but you don't want your camera to get in the way of your vision or the scene or the what you want to get a picture of, right? And so those things have to become very automatic, a lot of the things. And it's one of the things I thought about doing was sort of a series on ways you can practice certain techniques. But, it's hard for me to develop those kinds of tutorials where they make sense to do them, but I don't practice them myself. So I'm having a little bit of a challenge, but I can see where practicing certain techniques, or certain workflows, I should say, whether you're reprogramming the button functions or, approaching a scene and going a certain way about it. Like, for this scene, let's start working, we can always start working with the aperture first. Of all the exposure settings, let's start with aperture and then work with ISO, then work with shutter speed, or I'm sorry, work with shutter speed, then work with ISO last. Generally ISO should be your last choice in most exposure decision makings. And and that's a workflow for me and for general photography, I think. But when I started thinking about how am I going to develop exercises or practicing for that kind of workflow, um, there's too many caveats, where yeah, you don't want to start with aperture. You may want to start with your ISO first. Exact opposite, ISO shutter, then aperture. Um, so I don't know. I'm struggling a little bit with that, although I think it might be helpful. I'm struggling with a workflow model because I don't want to limit or tell somebody this is the way to do something or the only way to do something. I just want to give people enough uh, understanding of their camera system and how to use it so that they can develop their own workflow and methods of doing things. Because all of our brains, they all work differently. Things just make sense differently with us. When we see the same challenge, we might approach it very differently um, because of the way our brains work, and we might ultimately come to the same solution, but we approached it in very different ways. And I don't want to impose my biases on other people when it comes to photography. It should be a creative process and enjoyable. Um, and oops, I might have clicked the one. Now people can hear me. Let me try and expand this screen a little bit larger. I can't read that. Sorry, nature. I was having a hard time. And oh, Rob Meta, how you doing? I don't see you very often in the streams. Rod's been a follower of mine or a viewer for a long, long time. I should say viewer, not follower, right? Follower sounds a little condescending, doesn't it? But he's been a viewer for a long time. Uh, well, with all that tech made life easier, but also took away the sense of achievement and romance. Um, Imagine was a whole week to see your photo. Oh yeah, yeah. We used to wait, right? When we took photos with film, we'd have to send it in and come back a week later and pile through the bins to find our photos. I mean, it's actually the person behind the counter would look for it. Somehow I remember I used to look for my own though, but that might be just my imagination. I think it was the guy behind the counter who used to look for your photos. And it was always exciting, yeah, to kind of see what came out or what didn't. If you can't read this, start a podcast. Yeah, I can read it. I just enlarged the screen a little bit, but now I can only see one or two chats at a time. Um, is there 73 people here? I can't see how many people are here, but that's cool. And John Yutze says, when I work with a beginner, I start by explaining the triad and show the three variables relate to each other before I ever have them pick up the camera. Yep. I guess it would depend on the camera, but yeah, understanding exposure is really a good first step. Um, Joe Ellis, yes, Joe Ellis is back. I did see Joe video. He bought a GFX 100S, the new 100 megapixel camera from Fuji. Seems really excited about it. It's definitely on my short list of cameras or wish list of cameras, you know. And by wish list, I mean probably never be able to afford a camera like that personally. Uh, but yeah, that it was good to see him. It was good to see him out there and making videos for us again and talking about cameras, right, and photography. Because regardless of what gear or whatever people are talking about, you know, it's always about the host or the person presenting the information. And Joe Ellis is one of the best, really, in terms of it, presentation. You know, he's very professional, very thorough, and um, and has a lot of insight and experience that he can put into his videos that I could, right? Uh, so definitely, if you guys haven't checked out Joe Ellis's channel, uh, you know, check it out. He has a lot of good tutorials on Olympus cameras, and but now he's, I guess, you know, maybe he's not a visionary or Olympus educator. I think he was officially an Olympus educator at one point, but he may not have that obligation anymore. So now he can talk about anything, right, in terms of camera gear. Okay, I think I'm caught up. Oh, sorry, Steve had a question. Will a Panasonic 12 to 60 work well as native glass? I would say yes, right? If you're using it, particularly if you're using it on a Panasonic camera, then it would be native. But when you put a Panasonic 12 to 60 or any Panasonic lens on an Olympus body, it's not 100% compatible. So uh, one is that if the 12 to 60 has its own lens stabilization built in, there's nothing to have that lens image stabilization sync up with the in-camera stabilization, right? So you won't get that dual sync IS or whatever they call it. But you're not going to be able to sync the image stabilization between the lens and the camera if it's Panasonic and Olympus. And then there's some Olympus features that won't work with that lens. Like I don't think, like if you have Pro Capture, I don't think it'll work with uh, Panasonic lenses. Or if you have, well, definitely focus stacking in camera won't work. Maybe Pro Capture, but there's certain features that will not work specifically with Panasonic lenses. Another challenge I found was, and these are minor, they may or may not be deal breakers for you, right? Um, was the autofocusing. It's just a hair slower, just a hair. Um, but for all intents and purposes, it's the same for photos. In video, I noticed on contrast detect cameras like the EM5 Mark II, EM10 Mark II, the video autofocus and continuous autofocus was very slow. There's no comparison when you put an Olympus lens on an Olympus camera for continuous autofocus in video. There's no comparison. You can't do it. It's very slow with Panasonic. But with the newer cameras, the phase detects like the EM1 Mark II, EM5 Mark III, EM1 Mark III, it's pretty much the same. It works fine. So depending on what camera you have, you'll have more or less compatibility when it comes to video. But when it comes to just general still photography, putting a Panasonic lens on an Olympus camera is generally just fine for most applications. But there may be some minor incompatibilities that you may or may not run into in your workflow or in the kind of photography that you do. I use three different Panasonic lenses. One is the 7 to 14 that I use professionally, and I only have one issue with it, that I'm waiting for the 8 to 25 millimeter from Panasonic or from Olympus to come out that's going to replace that lens. But I've been using it professionally for years. The 12 to 32 kit lens I use on my EM5 Mark III for vlogging and everything else, photo, and it's excellent. It's sharper than the Olympus kit lens, and I don't have any issues with that lens on my EM5 Mark III. Nothing that I would need is limiting me. Now, like I said, I haven't run. It doesn't mean I won't run into some issue, but it's not something I've run into up to this point. And the other Panasonic lens I have is the 25 millimeter f1.7, and that has an issue in it back focuses at f4. I don't know if that's only on Olympus cameras or on both Olympus and Panasonic, but that's been discussed a lot, I guess. I've never run into it personally, so just don't shoot at f4 and you'll be okay. Um, but yeah, I would say the 12 to 60 is fine for most people. So I wouldn't hesitate to buy it. But if you can, you might be better off getting an Olympus 12 to 45 f4 rather than this 12 to 60. Um, I think it'll be a better lens for you. But and John Yutza says if the panel lens has OIS but no switch on the lens, you have to set the IBIS to on and lens priority IS to on for IS to work. Okay. Like I said, I don't have any Panasonic lens with IS in it, so I can't speak to that exactly. But a lot of you guys do, right? You buy Panasonic lenses that have OIS on them. Wait a minute. I never looked, but does this have OIS? This kit lens might have OIS. Mega, yeah, this has OIS. I've never had any issues with image stabilization. I didn't even think about that. I forgot this had OIS on it. This is my 12 to 32 from Panasonic. But anyhow, point is I use them without any issues. But some people have some issues that I think should not be deal breakers for most people. And John, our nature is chiming in as well to have both Olympus and Panasonic cameras and lenses. And in reference to the image stabilization, particularly with, like you said, with longer focal lengths, that's when the dual sync IS and all of that business really comes into play, or gives you a significant advantage in stabilization when you use the same brand lens on the same brand camera. And the Instax Insta360 X1 is, oh no, I didn't even know it was coming out. I'm holding off from any kind of 360, at least because this has come up before, 360 cameras. I bought the Insta360 1R and it's terrible. I hate it. I could not get decent 360 images out of it. I mean, I only tried a few times. I need to keep working with it maybe because, like I said, once you get to know your gear and understand how it works, you might be able to get better images out of it. But, and when I start quoting prices for 360 photos, people are not interested. They're like, no, that's just forget it. Just take a good picture and we're fine. We don't need it to be 360. But it's going to come up where I need to expand my services professionally to include 360 type photos. But I didn't know, I don't know, I haven't been following the 360 uh, market. And Paul Williams says, Rob, as a newbie to digital photography, what's the best way to store and edit photos? I have an Olympus ep.1 and EM10 Mark II. Really, just use Olympus Workspace. I have a tutorial on Workspace about importing photos and organizing them. Now, there's many ways to organize your photos as you start to build up your portfolio or your collection. But I do have a video on that. So that would be my recommendation as a beginner. Start with Workspace. Watch my video on importing and organizing your photos. And let me see if I can tell you the episode number. I put episode numbers on all my videos so I can reference them a lot easier. It's episode number 201. No, sorry, scratch that. Not 201. My mistake. Collections. It's this one. Episode number 149. Wow, it's an old one. But yeah, episode 149 is about importing and organizing your pictures from your SD card. And that'll get you started to store and edit photos. And then I have multiple tutorials on using Workspace. And I also have I usually do a photo editing live stream where I use Workspace to do photo editing every week. So just check my channel for a photo editing live stream. I'm trying to do them on Tuesdays now. Like I said earlier, I had to cut back on my live streaming because of my neck. But I think I'll do another one this Tuesday where I do photo editing using Workspace. And there's a note here says, Matt Horspool's web channel, Hughes Olympus cameras finding that 43 size small weather sealing can't be beat. Yes. I haven't seen that, but Matt, let me look. That's another new name. And there was another one. John Follows emailed me about a guy who uses Olympus EM1s for professionally. He does high-end work, like Lexus and Mesh. Lexus is the one that stood out to me. Matt, Horspo. Oh, here he is. Etched photography. Oh, okay. This is the guy. This is the guy that John Follows emailed me. So I did subscribe, as you can see, to his channel this morning. But I watched this video this morning. It's 40 minutes long. But he works professionally, right? And he shares some of his images there. It's a good. I think it's time well spent. It's 40 minutes, but it's time well spent. I think it's a good watch. I haven't checked out any of his other videos. Looks like he only has 779 subscribers, so I must have been number 779. So he's got a small selection of videos here. But the most recent one here, Olympus Cameras for Professional Work, is the one I watched this morning. It was really good. So thanks for sharing that, George, and reminding me that I watched that today. Um, and what's this? Stephen Long is asking, does anyone have experience of what the G9 is for aircraft and motorsport photography versus the M1 Mark III? No, not me. But if anyone can answer Stephen Long, I know there are a couple of hardcore aircraft type, air show type photographers that have been in my stream before. Some viewers, but I don't know if they're here today. I can't remember who they are. But yeah, help Stephen Long out. I personally don't have any because I don't do air shows and I don't have a G9, so I can't really speak to that personally. Intuitively, I would think that the M1 Mark III would be a better choice because it does have the Pro Capture feature. But I don't know how applicable that would be for air shows, using Pro Capture. Um, because there's a thousand other considerations when you're doing air shows. Uh, and motorsports, right? Other than being able to pre-buffer some images, um, you know, tracking, rolling shutter speed, image stabilization, all of there's a lot of other things, right? That you have to consider. How well is the camera when you're panning? Does it resist rolling shutter? If you need a very fast shutter speed. So, for example, in motorsports, you're panning a car racing across the track and you want to freeze the rims, right, as much as you can. You don't want them just to be a blur. And you want to freeze that car as much as you can at any speed. Drag racing is another one where you need very, very fast shutter speeds, like 1/10,000th, 1/20th of a thousandth. So you are definitely in silent shutter mode to capture drag racing. In particular, when the wheels spin so fast, the tires get really skinny. Things like that. There's a lot of things in that kind of photography that are considerations that I can't address from experience. As I'm just thinking in terms of what I'm familiar with our cameras. So I don't know how applicable. Pro capture is a big deal, I know, for a lot of sports action, human sports action, and birds in flight and things where you're trying to capture things just before it happens. You don't have to have a hair trigger. You can half press the shutter button and it'll buffer 30 or 60 images in RAW before you push the shutter button. So you end up with like a bunch of pictures, but one of those are going to be the right moment. Um, so that I think I would lean EM1 Mark III if you put a gun to my head right now, I'd say EM1 Mark III, right? And that's an unbiased opinion specifically for that one feature. Because the Panasonic has something called 4K capture, which is an 8 megapixel JPEG that does effectively the same thing, but I think there's other limitations other than being just JPEG. I think it crops a little too and things like that. So, but I don't know the G9 that well, so you'll have to do a little more due diligence. Matty Salanto might know over there he has a web YouTube channel here, Matty Salanto. He's a Lumix ambassador, so he would know the capabilities of that. And he may have videos on his channel about those specific capabilities of the G9. And workspace, John Yutze is saying his workspace needs to be an app so he can use it on his tablet. Yeah, I wouldn't hold your breath, to be honest. Oh, Scott Mumford, hello. How you doing? Good to see you. Yeah, I just decided this morning uh, to go live. Um, 'Cause I feel really good in the mornings, and I'm usually good until about lunchtime, and then because I try to do things and be active, right, and get stuff done. And then by afternoon, I just have to lay down and rest. So I just thought I'd risk it today. Whoops, didn't mean to show that. Let's see. And Benji says, just one more question on photographing artwork in natural light. Is it true that you should photograph with the lens slightly zoomed to get the best image and ISO 200 f8? No, that's not true. It depends on what lens, uh, and ISO 200 makes sense. That's the base ISO for the camera. F8 is arguable. I would say maybe F5. It depends on how flat the artwork is. If it's, the aperture affects the depth of field, meaning how much is in focus. So if it's a three-dimensional type artwork, F8 might be the way to go, so that you capture more of the three dimensions of the artwork, right? You have everything in focus. If it's just flat, right, artwork like a painting or a drawing, then you could probably get away with like f5.6 or f4 and use a faster shutter speed, because a lot of times artwork is indoors. Well, you just said it was outdoors, duh. You can probably get away with like f5.6. I think f5.6 is kind of the sweet spot for micro four thirds. Some may argue f8 is better, but personally I like f5.6. You can practice, take a few test shots at f5.6 and f8 and see what's better for your lens. But zoom lenses can be sharpest when they're wide open and then start to lose resolution as you zoom in. Or the sweet spot for the lens might be somewhere in the middle. And that's why people are saying just zoom in a little bit to kind of get closer to that sweet spot of sharpness. And then another reason you might want to zoom in is for perspective, right? You don't want the artwork to have any perspective distortion, because when you're wide angle and it's a large piece of artwork, you can get a perspective distortion so that the lines, let's say it's a picture of a building and you're too close and you're using a wide angle, the top of the building will seem very stretched out, or the bottom of the building will feel very stretched out. So if you're taking a picture of the building front and center, let's say it's 10 floors and you're taking a picture, say, of the 5th floor at a wide angle, floors 9 and 10 will be a little bit stretched, and floors 1 and 2 will look stretched out or elongated because you're using a wide angle. So that may be another reason you want to zoom in to eliminate perspective distortion. So again, that's something that you have to get a feel for. Focal length and wide angle distortion. Usually, once you're at about 25 millimeters, I would say most of the perspective distortion is not going to be relevant. It may still be there depending how large the artwork is, right? And how close you are and how far away. I wish there was some rule of thumb to say at what point do you eliminate perspective distortion, and there really isn't. Well, my rule of thumb would be 25 millimeters on micro four thirds, right? A 25 millimeter lens. That's a 50 millimeter, full frame equivalent. But in micro four thirds, a 25 millimeter lens or that focal length should minimize any perspective distortion. So that would be the other reason they might be suggesting you zoom in. And then, like I said, if it's a flat piece of artwork, f5.6 to me is kind of the optimal aperture to use. You can maybe even get away with f4 depending on what kind of zoom lens you have. So that would be sort of the considerations for some of the things you might want to consider when you're taking pictures of artwork. With the points that you brought up, because there's so many things to think about when you're doing if you're trying to do an exact duplication of the artwork, like professionally, there's so many more considerations you have to think about. But if you're just doing it for your own personal and you want to get as an accurate reproduction as you can, um, the things I talked about would be enough for you to get started. Okay, Rod, we'll see you later. Thanks for dropping in today. Rod Meta's heading out. And Nature says, I'm having trouble getting people to find my YouTube channel and putting in search for Nature for Music. Any suggestions? Well, that's a good one. Let's try it. I thought I subscribed to your channel, but hold on. I never know what. Let me see. Nature with Music. Oh, I see what you mean. The problem with your name is that these are very strong keywords in terms of search. People are always looking for these kinds of images, right? Where it's just a serene environment with music. And the fact that you name your channel that puts it in competition with these kinds of videos that people might be searching for. The other challenge is that your channel doesn't have any authority yet, right? So when you type in a search term for like this, then um, the search algorithm is going to look for channels with more authority. Like if you look at this 41 million views, right? That video in of itself has a very high authority for this search term, uh, more so than your channel. And let's see. I don't know if even that's going to help. I thought for sure I subscribed. You guys are looking at all my personal channels I subscribe to. Hopefully there's nothing inappropriate here. Uh, no, I don't. I guess I didn't subscribe. Just tell you what, Nature. What you can do is email me, right? You know my email address, rob@robtrek.com. Email me a link to your channel. And the next time I live stream, I will, well, if you email it right now, I can put the link in right now in the comments. So just email me right now, um, and I can put a link to it in the comments section, or in the chat section at the very least, and then maybe in the show notes if I get a chance. But I'll definitely mention it next time if I don't do it today. And I see a question here. I'm going to try and bring it up. Zachary's asking, how do we access those buffered images you refer to? When I say buffered, they're buffered in the uh, what do they call it, a cache, but basically it's buffered in short-term memory in the camera. But then they actually get written to the SD card, so they're actually saved. So if you have it set to the maximum, say 60 frames per second in RAW, you'll get 60 images written to your SD card. So they're not hidden. They are on your SD card like any other image. And people that use Pro Capture a lot, end up with several thousand images on their memory card because Pro Capture saves every single image. So it's not buffered and disappears. It's buffered, and then after you take the picture you want, when you actually push the shutter button all the way down, it writes all 60 images to your memory card. And Benji says, I'm an amateur, obviously learning a lot, but today, thanks. Okay, Benji, yeah, anytime. And Scott says, any experience with in-camera art filters? They don't seem to import into Lightroom Classic. All they seem to come in as base image as you see what you get without the... Okay, yes, Scott. So art filters are always a JPEG. So it should import two images, a raw image and a JPEG image when you shoot with an art filter in camera, right? So I set the art filter in camera to say dramatic tone or soft focus. I should get two images, one raw image which is untouched and one JPEG image which is the art filter applied to the raw image. Now the confusion sometimes is if you're using Workspace, Olympus Workspace will show the art filter applied to the raw image, where Lightroom does not. Lightroom will, sometimes you might see for a brief couple seconds, the raw will look like it has the art filter applied, but then it'll reimagine the image back to it'll redraw the image back to its original raw. That's because the raw image has a JPEG embedded into it for doing thumbnails, right? So when you go into File Manager and you see the thumbnails, for example, those thumbnails on the raw images are actually a JPEG that's embedded in the raw image. And that JPEG, that embedded JPEG with Olympus cameras will have the art filter applied to the raw image. But whenever you take a picture with an art filter, you get two files, raw image and a JPEG. And the JPEG will always have the filter applied. The raw image will have the filter applied in the embedded JPEG in the raw, which may show on Lightroom briefly, but Lightroom will redraw its own thumbnail with showing you the actual raw image. I hope that makes sense, but I can understand the confusion because when you work in Workspace, the raw image a lot of times shows the art filter applied to the raw. But regardless, even in Workspace, you'll have two files, JPEG and RAW. And John is here. Let's see. Hey, John, I got your email this morning, and I did watch that dude. I forget his name already. And I shared it with the group here a little bit earlier today. Let's see. robtrek, have you tried the new enhancer feature in Adobe Camera Raw? I have tried it on handheld high-res RAW files. The results are awesome. I've tried a couple of things, but not on high-res shot. I tried a couple of the features. I forget what it was. Some kind of like copy a look from one type of image to another. It's a very interesting feature, but I haven't spent a lot of time with it personally. Because you know me, I'm more of a in-camera guy, and then the post-processing is mostly just minimal on my part. But I did try it. It did look interesting. I'll have to try. And high-res shot mode is not something I do a lot of either. Those are two things I don't do a lot of, but I can try. I'll definitely keep that in mind now that I know that you're getting good results with it. I'll try and take some high-res shots and then look at that. Oh, okay. Scott says the camera was set to RAW only. Yeah. I'm surprised though that when you put an art filter on, it doesn't automatically do RAW plus JPEG. I thought it did. So if I set this, well, it'll take too long. But yeah, I always shoot RAW plus JPEG. Then I know I'll definitely get the art filter image. But I thought when you select an art filter, it automatically, but maybe it doesn't. If you have it on RAW only, it may not The thing you can do is you can import them into Workspace, the raw images, and then export the raw image as a JPEG with that art filter applied. And then you can import that back into Lightroom. So if you have some select images uh, that you want to look at in Lightroom with the art filter applied, that's one thing you can do is go into Workspace, export those RAWs as JPEGs, and the JPEG should have that art filter applied. And he's talking about super resolution in camera raw. Okay, I haven't seen that. I did get an update on Lightroom yesterday that, and there was another one. There was three more this morning on Photoshop. So maybe that's what they were. I haven't even looked at it. But when I turned my computer on before streaming today, there was like three updates for Photoshop. Uh, so maybe I haven't even seen it yet. I think this is what Soft Fun was. This is what I was referring to as a comment by Soft Fun. Camera Raw 13.2. So yeah, I did update the Camera Raw. I think that was yesterday because there's a few more updates yesterday, and then three more this morning. Oh, John Truman is here. How you doing, John? Good to see you. How are you liking that black and white technique I showed you to process your images? I mean, I'm really digging it, but you may not have liked the result that got using the high pass filter, but I thought that was a cool thing. Um, let's see. Thomas Zazauskas, how you doing? Says, good morning. Why don't cameras have histograms that reflect the raw file, what the camera actually saw, rather than compressed JPEGs? Um, I'd have to guess, but um, it might. My only guess is it's with respect to processing power, um, because, like you said, when you have your camera set to RAW only, when you preview your pictures, you're looking at a JPEG image on your live view screen or in your EVF. And again, that JPEG is the one that's embedded into the raw image or the raw image file. And then what Thomas is saying is that the histogram that you see is showing the values from that JPEG image, even though you shot raw only. Okay. Um, and my guess would be uh, is that either the raw image is not processed yet, right? Um, and it would take too much processing power to convert the values in a raw image to a histogram, so it drains more battery, right? So it shortens the battery life. So rather than doing the processing required of the raw image um, to create the histogram off a raw image, they decided to use less processing power to process the values off a JPEG to create the histogram. That's just a wild guess. you know, how much more power does it take to read a raw image that data values to create a histogram versus a JPEG? I don't know if it's even measurable. But that would be my first guess, is that since the raw image hasn't been processed, but the JPEG has, you can read the values off a processed image, but you cannot read values off an unprocessed image like a raw file. Um, just my guess. I I don't know why, to be honest, but that's my wild guess. And Darko says, I was watching vids on NFTs, artist cryptocurrencies. Do you have anything about I don't know anything about it. I did see something Peter Forsgard posted, and I read that article. Um, I have no idea, but for those of you guys that haven't heard about this, people are selling JPEGs for like millions of dollars. And I don't know why. There's something about that JPEG that makes it unique and original and makes it worth all this money. So I'm at a loss what it is, though. I don't know anything about it. But something sold for like $69 million the other day. And then I saw something else sell for $3 million. And I'm like, how are people selling these pictures for millions of dollars? And the article went on to say something about it. It makes this particular JPEG unique and original. It has something built into it. Uh, my guess is this is some stupid fad with people with too much frickin' money. You know? I mean, if I want to show a picture that I just spent, say, $3 million on, I'm going to put it on my wall with lighting and I want to print. I'm not just going to like hold up my phone and say, here's this picture, I paid $3 million for it, and this is the only way you can look at it. You know, it just seems stupid to me. But I don't know. Maybe there's something to it. I mean, if I can make 10% of that, you know, just 300,000 or $690,000 for one of my images, um, it might be worth my time to look into it. And David says, there was an article on this in the Washington Post the other day. I still don't get it. Yeah, I'm with you, Dave. I don't get it. And I see. I have to scroll up a little bit. Okay, so that was Darko. Here's Michael. Michael's also been a longtime viewer. Uh, but great stream as always. Can you explain what the green bars and the orange bars mean on the Olympus camera histogram? I never seem to find the. Oh, okay. Um, I know the green bars. Okay, so yeah, let me see if I can show you guys because it's if I explain it to Micah, he'll get it, but the rest of you won't, right? Let me let me let me fix this because this is actually a good question, right? Let me get it so the green bars show up. Oops. I need to go into filters and turn off the green screen. There. All right, so I'm going to close your comment here, Michael, because it's blocking the screen. Or maybe actually I can just dumbass. Excuse me. Maybe I can just move this like so. All right, so what Michael is asking is there's the histogram here, right? So if I put my hand in here, you can see the histogram jumps around. And you see this green area right here. Well, it's moved. Now it's over here. There's a little bit of a green in the histogram, and then there's like this orange red color over here. All right? This green area right here. Okay, so the white area is the overall histogram. Let me put a normal image in here. How about one of my prints? All right, so here's a landscape picture I took, one of my prints. All right, so this is the histogram. So what we're seeing is that there's a lot of shadows, right? Right here. There's a lot of shadows. That's why the histogram, the white area is very high over here. And then there's not too many midtones and it goes to very bright. And then there's a little bit of a spike, but you'll notice there's no orange bar. So we'll come back to the orange bar in a second. This green area right here represents what the exposure is, or the histogram, in the center of the frame. Okay, so if I put something, I have anything white, if I put something directly in the center of the frame, that's not really white, but you can see that the histogram, the green area is spiked a little bit. This white, let me get something exactly white. Hold on. Oh, here we go. You see, if I put something in the center of the frame, you'll see that the green area just represents the exposure in the center of the frame, not the rest of the frame. Because if I move this out of the center, right, you'll notice that the green area is now moved down, because now it's looking at this area, which is kind of dark. So the green area moved down to the dark end of the histogram. Then if I move it back up, you'll see that the green is now dead center, because it's a middle gray. So the green area is just the exposure in the very center of the frame, about the size of my hand. Okay, now when I didn't have my picture here, we saw a spike, right? An orange spike. Let me try this. There. Now we got an orange spike. The orange spike on the right represents clipping. So what it's telling me is that this thing is overexposed and it's going to clip completely to white, right? Because that's what this orange bar represents. And if I had something completely black, you'll get clipping on this side. You'll see that the image is clipped on this side, meaning it's completely black and there's no way to recover it. And since the orange line is over here, this is clipped completely to white and there's no way to recover any details out of this. So I hope that makes sense. That was a great question, though. All right, let me turn my green screen back on. Where is it? Here we go. Green screen back on. And me back. Oh, wait. There we go. All right, so I think that answers your question. And I hopefully that made sense to everybody else. That's why I had to put the camera so you guys could see it. Because if I just explained them to Michael, he would get it. Because I know he's a very competent photographer, but the rest of you guys wouldn't know, right? And then Retro Gamer, how you doing? I think I got an email from you recently. I can't remember what it was about, but hopefully I responded. It says, I suspect you have already knowledge. I was trying to shoot in manual and keep my focus locked, but my lens kept autofocusing when it came to pressing the shutter, despite changing the shutter options. Yeah, when you put the camera in manual, when you say you're trying to shoot a manual, I assume you mean you're trying to shoot in a manual picture mode, right? So again, let me go back to my camera here. So right now, if you look here, right, I'm in movie mode. So I assume you mean you're trying to go into manual mode. So let me see. Let me turn the mode dial. My EM10, the mode dial is a little bit flaky. Okay, so now I'm in manual mode, right? On the mode dial. And then the manual mode does not put your lens in manual focus. So what you do is you go in the super control panel and let me turn off the green screen again. It's hard to see. Okay, whoops. So you go in here and you have to change this. So you rotate the rear dial. Whoops, I'm sorry, rotate the front dial to change this to manual focus. So now you're in full manual exposure, full manual focus. So I hope that answers your question. Okay. Um, Man, now this is like a real Q&A, right? All right. And Michael says, awesome explanation. Oh, okay, good. I'm glad that made sense. I had to drag it out a little bit, but and Retro says also learned about the histogram. Good. Yeah, that was a good question from Michael. Hey Logan, how are you? How you doing? That was a good question from Michael. Um, and problem solved. Okay, good. All right. I think I've caught up with all the questions again at this point. So if you have any other questions, I'll do my best to answer them. Fortunately, the last couple I knew. Sometimes you guys ask me questions, I have no idea, and I have to get back to you. It doesn't happen too often, but time to time, I get a question I can't answer or give a good answer to. Like if it's anything photography based, I usually have a hard time. Oh my goodness, Arthur's here. How you doing? And I see Verana's walked in as well. Good to see you guys. Yeah, I'm going to wrap it up here pretty soon, but yeah, it's good to see everyone. Um, let's see. Okay, good. All right, I'm going to sit back a little bit just for a second. Um, John Truman's asking, why do you shoot in aperture priority when manual mode with the histogram works really well in EVF? Um, I personally don't use the histogram at all. You know, it. I can just look at the EVF and get the exposure that I want. I don't care if the image is has blown highlights or crushed shadows down to black. Um, I care more about the lighting and the tones and the composition of the image and the scene. Am I telling a story? Am I, is there some visual impact? Is there some emotion? And then I adjust the exposure, the highlights and shadows, like our Olympus cameras have to create the scene that I want, right? And the histogram has no role in that at all. Uh, Other photographers that, particularly like landscape photographers or maybe, very technical type fields. I mean, I can only think of landscape for now as a good example. They probably use the histogram a lot because they want to make sure they have not clipped any highlights. They don't want to crush any shadows to black. They may be much more conscious of the histogram. And those things that I talked about would be very helpful, right? Um, because I've seen videos. I don't know which landscape photographer. It's probably Thomas Heaton. But those guys, they pull up the histogram and they look at it, to figure out what's going on. I'm just not that kind of photographer. I don't need to use a histogram. Let me rephrase that. Um, I don't care about the histogram, what it does. I care more about, the mood or scene or emotion or subject, whatever I'm trying to create effect in the scene. Um, and histogram just plays no role in that. But if you're a more technical photographer where highlights and shadows not being clipped is an issue, like product photography would be one. Um, but the problem is, regardless of what camera you have, the dynamic range of our cameras are very limited compared to our eyes, what our eyes can do, I should say, with our brains. And um, things are always going to be clipped and always going to be crushed to black uh, in just about any camera in a high dynamic range scene. Um, So again, that makes the histogram even less useful um, for very high dynamic range type scenes. You know, because there's techniques like expose to the right, expose to the left, where people try to push all of the values of your pixels into the right side, excuse me, the right side of the histogram so that you collect as much data as you can onto the sensor. I understand those techniques, and like I said, if you're a technical photographer and you're looking for technique to get uh, the maximum latitude out of your sensor or maximum whatever, best image quality you can, you need a histogram to apply these kinds of techniques. And again, um, those are not values or variables that I consider when I take a picture. Now, you might ask, I'm a real estate photographer, architectural photographer. Um, would it be important then when I do my professional work? And again, I say, no, it's not important because when I do my real estate photography, I'm dealing with extremely high dynamic range scenes. Very bright windows shining into a very dark room with dark furniture. No camera is going to be able to handle that kind of dynamic range. So histogram is useless to me at that point. Um, so um, in my real estate photography, I use a lot of flash. So the light is controlled, and I shoot in manual and I use the EV meter, right? And I spot meter sometimes, but histogram never comes up. I never look at it. Um, so anyway, that's why. Long answer to the short question. I'm not saying there isn't reasons to use a histogram. It's just there's no kind of photography that I do that it makes any difference what the histogram says. And I see a couple more questions. And oh, I sent you a detail. Do not expect miracles on my work. Okay, I will check that out. Give me just a second. Well, if I don't do it now, I'm going to forget. Give me a second. Nature with Music has a YouTube channel. And let's see if I got it. Not yet. Let me do. Everybody take a breather while I'm looking this up. um, so what I have to do is I have to import from my check mail now. Okay. Ah, here we go. All right, so here I'm going to type in the chat section a link to Nature with Music's channel. But this is it here. So yeah, um, the words the name of your channel is a very competitive uh, search term, right? Nature with Music. And your channel with 12 subscribers has no authority in the algorithm, right? Has no presence. So that's why it's not coming up. And the only way, let me look at your about page. Okay, you need to fill this out. Okay, you can always look at mine. Let me. That's my thumbnail. You need to fill that out. So let me show you mine. Um, so I tried the stuff my description with some keywords and things, um, and then some links, and then you can have more links down here. Uh, and then let me see your videos real quick. I mean, I'm not a YouTube algorithm expert, but you know, I can tell you a couple of things. Um, okay, your description doesn't have anything either, right? It has this very basic. If you look at um, if you look at one of my videos, right? Let me find a legit video, not a live stream. Like this, Olympus. Is this a live? No, this is not a live stream. But look at the description. I got, you know, all the buy me a coffee links. I've got these hashtags. They have to go at the bottom. Uh, and then let's see. There is a section for. Let's see. I got tags, description, end screens. Okay, here are my tags, right, that you can put in. And you can see all the tags. So you would put nature with music, videos about nature, played with music, you know, put all the keywords, stuff those in, things like that. Okay, anyway, that's enough of that. But that's Nature's channel, definitely. Let me subscribe now before I forget. There we go. All right, you now have one more subscriber, 18. Okay. Oh, you have a website too. All right. Let me give you a website. This is Nature's website as well. So check out Nature with Music's channel on YouTube and his website, and subscribe if it's something you want to follow and watch and enjoy. Okay. Uh, okay. My channel is about Manchester. Okay, John. I didn't know you have a channel. Uh, what's this? Retro Gamer says, real estate guys I gleaned from YouTube use exposure bracketing. Flambient seems way technical. Histogram surely has a role in establishing flash power settings. I think, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Um, but I never use it. And I don't have any problems using Flambient without using a histogram. Um, and it's not that hard. It's the technique itself is not that difficult. It's just it takes a lot of work. Yeah, it's pretty involved, I guess. But once you get the hang of it, it's simple. I say it's simple because I've been doing it forever. But um, yeah, real estate photography is definitely there's a lot of skill sets you have to learn to do a good job. But once you learn them, they don't change, right? You can go into any situation and really you'll be fine. Um, and I want to make sure I didn't miss anyone else. People need to watch. Oh, here's an interesting. This is a good channel, E6 Vlog, right? If they want to understand composition, Craig is really good at explaining it for all sorts of photography. Yeah, definitely E6 Vlogs is a very entertaining and educational channel as well. Um, so definitely check him out. I've subscribed to his channel, I believe. Um, some channels I don't subscribe to because their videos pop up in my feed anyway, and I don't have to subscribe because just like Tony and Chelsea or Chrono's Photo, I don't really have to subscribe to their channels because their stuff comes up in my feed anyway. Um, but anyhow, yes, E6 Vlogs, definitely an excellent channel. I guess I can pull it up. E6. This is E6 Vlogs channel. I'll put a link in the chat section here. He's an excellent. Has he been posting lately? Let's see. Dang, he's been posting a lot. Well, not a lot, but one every month. I have not subscribed to him. That's funny. Okay. And Nature with Music also has an Instagram account and Facebook. I'll just put it up there. His name is Brian Whitfield. Okay. So if you guys are interested in more, but see, Brian, if you had those links in your description on your YouTube channel, people would find you that way as well, right? From YouTube to Instagram. Like if you look at my over here, you know, I got my Instagram, and then of course buy me a coffee if you guys want to support the channel and the streams. But I have my Instagram right there, #1, right? And Benji says, thanks again, Mr. Trek, for all your efforts and look after your. Oh, thank you. I will continue watching your videos in the meantime, and Olympus workspace walkthroughs are really great. Okay, good. Good, Benji. Yeah. And just come back, you know, just make sure you check my channel for whenever I live stream. It's going to be a little spotty the next couple of weeks, but when I do live stream, I do try to answer as many questions as I can when they come up. So I can always help you in the live stream. And Barana had a question. Oh, okay. Sorry. Let me find it. Barana. Well, here's one from David real quick. Can you do more than 2 frames multiple exposure? Yes, you can. Not directly though. You can do 2 frames, right, that we all know of. And if you're shooting in RAW, what you can do is go back and do, there's a function called image overlay in the camera. So you can take as many pictures as you want, then overlay them after you've taken them. So, I mean, I guess in theory, you know, 4 or 5 overlays might be enough because it would get a little bit confusing if you tried to do more than that in camera. But there's a function called image overlay in the camera. I'm not going to demonstrate it here, but I do just want to show you. Let's see, do I have a picture? So if I click this, I can scroll down. Oh, it has to be a raw image. I only got one picture here. Let me take a raw picture. Is that raw? No. Oh, here we go. There's raw. All right, so if I take a raw picture and then push the play button, JPEG, why? I just said, why? It's really awkward working with this thing. Hold on. I'm in large superfine plus raw. Well, I probably need more than one raw image. Take a picture of my pyramid. And then a picture of my ruler. All right, now the image overlay should pop up. How come the raw? How come the raw? All right. I'm at a loss why it's not showing up right now. Next week, David, when you know next week when we're in the photo walk, I'll show you directly. I don't know why it's not showing up now. I think, oh, I know why. Because I'm hooked up to the HDMI cable. Um, when I'm hooked up to HDMI, some of the features don't work. I think that's why. But there's a feature called image overlay when you have raw images. Okay. Sorry. I'm trying to find, I think it was Borana. I'm going to do a couple more questions then. Where is it? I'm scrolling all the way up. Here it is. All right. Borana, I'm sorry this took so long. Let's see, 11:45. So you asked this thing like 18 minutes ago. I'm really sorry. Question about firmware update. Could it update from 1.0 to 2.0 while there is 1.2, meaning just skip, yeah, in between? Usually you can. It will tell you in the instructions if you cannot. But the updates are handled automatically by Olympus Workspace software. So what you do is after you do an update, let's say you do a firmware update, and then you go back, it'll automatically refresh to check to see if there's additional updates. So you'll see that when you update an Olympus Workspace. Um, if you're not sure, just do the process twice. But I believe it's not unusual to be able to skip. Now there was one time I do remember an update where you could not go from say version 2 to version 4 without installing version 3 first. That does happen sometimes, but the Olympus Workspace uh, updater should manage that for you. So if you're not sure after you do an update on a firmware, just run the Olympus Workspace firmware update software a second time. And it should, if there is an additional update after that, then it should uh, it should do it for you. It should be all automatic at this point. Um, okay. And let's see. Been great today, Rob, but have to go now. Yeah, me too. I have to go soon. What time is it? Yeah, it's 12. Um, John Matthews, how you doing? Little late today. Just a thought on ETTR. Many people incorrectly think you do it by increasing the ISO when they should be lowering it, the shutter, or adding flash. Okay. Like I said, ETTR is not a technique that I use uh, intentionally. I may indirectly somehow, but yeah, I rarely do it by raising ISO. I rarely raise my exposure by raising ISO. I try to uh, extend the shutter speed, make the shutter speed longer or open the aperture. ISO is kind of the last thing I think about when it comes to exposure, um, and only do it if I'm forced to. Sometimes you're forced to use a higher ISO. Not sometimes, but a lot of times you're forced to use a higher ISO, but don't use a higher ISO for ETTR. I think because when you raise ISO, the problem with raising ISO is it has an opposite effect of what you're trying to do with ETTR. Because ETTR is about trying to expand, or not expand, but trying to get the most dynamic range and least amount of noise you can out of an exposure. So you overexpose or you expose to the right a little bit. And you can do that by opening the aperture or using a longer shutter speed. Raising ISO has two problems that go against what ETTR is. One, raising ISO adds noise, which is, like I said, what you're trying to avoid with ETTR. Raising ISO can add noise. Two, raising ISO limits your dynamic range, right? Um, so that's the other thing that ETTR is trying to maximize is dynamic range. But ISO, by raising ISO, you do the two things that ETTR is trying to accomplish: reduce noise and maximize dynamic range. Um, and again, sometimes you have to raise ISO, but that should be the last thing you choose when you're trying to create an exposure, right? And for most of the photography that I do, ISO is the very last setting that I change. If I can't achieve the shutter speed and aperture, if I cannot achieve the exposure with shutter speed and aperture, that's when I adjust the ISO. ISO should always be last, in my opinion. And I think that's what John is trying to say here. And Malik is here. Hello. And well, Bron, okay, you're welcome, Bron. I'm glad that helped about the firmware. Yeah, David, I don't know what's going on. Dave Nelson is talking about viewer count. I have no idea how many people are on my live stream. But there's enough questions and comments here. That's all that matters, right? I mean, who cares if I have 1,000 or 2,000 viewers, but there's nobody commenting, right? If I just get a dozen or so people that are very active in the comment or chat section, that's what makes the live streams enjoyable for me, knowing that I'm communicating and reaching out with you guys, right? I wouldn't want a live stream with thousands of viewers, but nobody can chat. And nobody's chatting. That would be basically a television broadcast, right? Just watching something on TV. And live streaming is not about just broadcasting a message or news or entertainment, right? Live streaming is about interacting with your viewers. And that's what, well, anyway, those are my thoughts on live streaming. And John says, thanks for your YouTube tutorial. You're welcome. And wow, now everybody's commenting, and now I can't keep up. David Crooks is here. You've probably been here the whole time, but this is the first time I've seen your name come up. David, and I mentioned David early in the stream that he runs the local photography club that I go to. Just taking a breather while I look at some of the, and Dave is just coming in just quick and dirty, he said. Rob should start a philosophy channel. I would be a terrible philosopher. What did I say that would make you think I should be a philosopher? That's funny. No one's ever said that to me. I'm excited using this. Oh, I don't know what that's about. So John's asking, what's my next planned photo shoot? It's going to be, um, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. I can tell you, let me just pull it up. Um, Where's my photo vlog? Here we go. And I'm going to put a link to this in the, whoops, not that link. Events. Yeah, this is the right link. I'm going to put a link to the photo club I belong to here, run by David Crooks. But the next planned event is this one. This is the name of the photo club. Well, you don't see it here. I'm going to go to photograph Glen Echo Park, which is apparently it's an old amusement park, and so that should be interesting. I've never been there before, so this will be fun. That's where I'm going. But this is the name, Virginia Beltway Photography Meetup. That's the name of the photo club I belong to, and I just put that link down. So if you guys want to join me in Glen Echo Park next week, come on over. Okay. Okay, Commodore. All right, we'll see you later. Have a good week. You're awful quiet this stream. And David says David Crooks runs the group I just showed you guys. I'm thinking of adding another one next. Good. Yeah, put as many as you can. I'll make as many as I can. And there was a question. I didn't mean to show this. Question here from Matt K. Says, Rob, do you print your photos? I thought about buying a printer, but I am a bit afraid I will never end up printing anything at all or will spend a fortune on. Okay, I do print. Like I was showing, this is one of my prints when I had my. Okay, so this is what happened to me. I'll talk about my printing experience. I'm not giving you advice. I'm just telling you what my experience has been. Let me find my photo album. Hold up. Where's my other book? Oh, I don't use that one as much. All right, I do print time to time, okay? Meaning maybe once or twice a month. I'll go back and print photos that I took over the month. And so, almost out of battery here. But there's the large print I have, and then here's a photo album of other stuff, and my most recent stuff is here. Oh no, it's not. Yeah, this is pretty recent. So I do print. So there's the proof, right? uh, and and then of course I showed you guys this, and I have a couple other large prints hung up around my house. This has been my experience. Is I bought two printers. I bought one, which is kind of my workhorse for everything, but it's also a decent Epson photo printer. But it only prints up to 8.5 by 11, like regular sheet paper. And it has trays for like 4 by 5, which is like what I was showing you in here, right? I print mostly 4 by 5s, and I found that I get almost as much satisfaction out of that, and I print more often when I print 4 by 5s or 8 by 10s, right? Because I have a lot of 8 by 10s I've printed as well. I just did a bunch. I'll show you, because I redid my bedroom. And you'll print a lot more often like that. I bought another printer that does these larger prints, right? This is, I think, 13 by 17. I forget the size. But yeah, it's quite a bit larger, right? That printer, I rarely printed that size. Because you don't print that size. You print that size normally to hang on your wall, but you only got so much space on your wall, right? Before you don't need you can't print any more photos. And then what do you do with the large print? You just put it in some kind of portfolio, like one of these big artist portfolios. No, I'm not going to do that. For me, right? Um, so that large format printer that I bought, the ink cartridges or the print heads all dried out and it's totally useless. And I only got about a dozen prints out of it. Um, so I just wasted all my money on that. And I've got all this paper that I bought for because I was planning to print large all the time. But in practice, unless you get one of those artist portfolio things and start putting your large prints in that, you're never going to print large to hang on your walls. I mean, why would I put it into an artist portfolio and not look at the pictures? Because then it'll just collect dust and disappear somewhere in the attic, for somebody to find one day. So that's been my experience, right? I'm not saying that's everybody's. A lot of people love to print large and print all the time, like Matty Salantu, Thomas Heaton, all those guys. But for me, I found just printing on 8x10 and 4x5s, I get a lot more enjoyment out of it. And then if I want a large print, I'll print large. I'll go to the photography store, my local photo shop, or you can do it online now. Send out and do large prints that you want to do large. So that's my experience with printing. I really wanted to show you guys one other thing. It hasn't been that long. Oh, here it is. So this is my bedroom. If you've been following my streams a long time, you know I've been working on my bedroom. But right here, these are all 8x10s that I printed, and then this is one. This picture here is actually two 8x10s printed together. So the Epson printer that I have allows you to print two 8x10s, and then you put them together to make a larger, a double that, right? So that would be this one would be 17 by 11 is this size, because it's really just an 8.5 by 11 here and 8.5 by 11 on this side, and then I just tape them together and put them into the frame. So you can print large even with a smaller printer if you want to. Even with a small printer, you can print larger. You just have to tape them together. And it does a good job. It's a feature built into the Epson printer. I have an Epson XP800 that I bought like 7 or 8 years ago. That's still working great. But the large format printer that I bought is a piece of junk now. And I hardly printed anything at all. That's been my experience. Okay. Okay, Matt. So the big size, like I said, it's like, yeah, what I said about big sizes. I like printing 4x5s, or 8x10s, but not large size. And what's this question? Did I see the discussion on DPR about Olympus sensor issues showing up at high F numbers, not showing up to F8 or below? I thought you had an answer on this. No, I've not seen this discussion at all. I'll look into it though. That is curious. And I got Canon Selfie Use. Love it. Only thing I feel comfortable printing with dry house. I travel too much for an ink-based system. Oh, okay. Yeah. Yep. My printers are all dried out. At least that one. But if you print once a week, anything, right? Um, on your printer, on an inkjet printer, you'll be fine. Just one page a week and it'll be fine. So I try to do that. And Scott says, thanks, you just saved me a lot of money that I can apply. Okay, good. I, I assume we were talking about not buying a printer. And I bought a Canon postcard photo printer, stopped using. I think Google Photos, in the way it creates automatic albums and nails views of past memories for me, occupies that space for phone. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, just showing photos on your phone is fine. I just like to print and put them in albums. You know, if I was smart, I would make little notes here because I know in 10 years I'm not going to remember anything about that photo. Remember how people used to write on the back of the photo notes and things? Oh, thank you, Arthur. When I was showing my bedroom, they're just photos of my dog, right? And the one in the middle was just a photo of me petting my dog at, by a stream. Glen Echo is on the 27th. Oh, so it's not even next week. It's 2 weeks from now. My bad. I have it on my calendar. I just mentally I thought it was next week, but it's 2 weeks from now. So nothing coming up this week. Okay. Hence the comment about you're going to add one. Okay, now it all makes sense, David. Sorry. And Jan says, I printed some medium size from my 16 megapixel camera. Also did some old ones from an old 5 megapixel point and shoot and was amazed how, yeah. I mean, you can shoot, yeah. I mean, you can print large. Doesn't matter the megapixels of the camera. I mean, because there's more to a photo than just pixel peeping or looking at every little detail on a print. You kind of stand back. Depending how large a print is, you're going to stand back, 2, 3 feet to several feet, right from there. And perceptually, you're not going to see all of the lost details in a low megapixel camera like 5 megapixels. That's more than enough for most prints. And Nature says printing would take up too much space both for the printer and hundreds of prints. I will stick my computer hard drive's new LAN. Yeah, you got quite the setup there, if I recall. You went with a full-on RAID backup or something. You got something really fancy. And Logan, I guess this is in reference to uh, the discussion on DPR. I don't know. I mean, if we're talking about diffraction, yeah, they say diffraction starts at f8 on micro four thirds. I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I'm not. Most of the technical things of a camera, though I try to do the best I can, are ultimately not the kind of picture I take. Have any, don't have much impact. Oh, God, I need to end the stream. I can't say a sentence anymore. But I don't worry about the the very minute details of like using high f-stops causing diffraction or using high ISO causes more noise or you know things like that. I just try to capture the image or the scene that I want and be damned the settings, histogram settings, all of that doesn't matter to me. Ultimately, it's the image that matters. And yeah, sure, it's good to know. It's a must know. You really should know all of these things so you can get the most out of your camera to give you the most flexibility so you can be more creative and knowing the limitations of your camera, whether it's using high f-stops, what is that number where diffraction sets in, what ISO is acceptable to you, how much motion blur do you want? So what shutter speeds would there's so many things, right, that you really need to know a lot of things to get the image that you want, and you should know them. But sometimes discussions go into areas that just have a very low interest to me. Like diffraction is a very low interest topic for me. I mean, I tell people, yeah, diffraction can set in, and it makes the images a little bit soft the higher the f-stop that you use. So that's why earlier in the stream I said I feel like f5.6 is kind of the sweet spot for most lenses and on micro four thirds. So I set a lot of times I'll set my lenses to f5.6 and do a photo walk almost completely at f5.6 um, for all the images, because then I don't have to worry about the shallow depth of field messing up the image if there's any potential for that. And I don't have to worry about things being out of focus because, a different, I don't know, f5.6 works for me in a lot of things. And it's just enough light for me. I don't have to push the ISO. Oh, Darko's off to do some chores. Okay, we'll see you later. Thanks for coming in. And yeah, high f-stop is the only way. So yeah, here's another thing. This is a creative choice, right? You use f16 or f22 to get starburst. If your lens has good starburst capability, and it's only, most lenses do fine, but, this is a creative choice. You're not worried about ultimate sharpness. You don't care about diffraction. You just want that starburst, and you're creating an image or a scene or a mood or an effect or a drama with a starburst, and you're using the high aperture to achieve that. Okay, I think I'll end it here because I need to. I'm going to my nephew's birthday party today, and I'm a little bit behind. And they live in a very scenic area. It's about an hour and a half away. I I really, and it's a beautiful day today. I really wanted. I might be able to get some shots today. I'll take my camera with. I mean, I'm taking it anyway, right? You take your camera with you everywhere, right? But anyhow, I'm going to end it here. So everyone, thanks so much for joining me today. I had a great time. I mean, I'm 2.5 hours, so that's a long time for me. And I'm feeling pretty good. I'm not hurting like I was the other day. I should be back on Tuesday. We'll maybe do some photo editing. So look for that. But thanks for taking time out of your day today, spending it with me. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you all again.